take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces. This is a great conference. And I have to say, that may have been your maiden speech, but it sure didn't sound like it. It sounded like you've been doing it for a really long time. So let's talk about your agency. Let's sort of drill down about how your agency is or is not closing the digital divide, although I do want to pick up on the facial recognition stuff. And first to say that the Institute, or is the Center for Privacy and Technology, which is sort of part of Alex's institute, is doing amazing work along those lines, Claire Garvey and Laura Moy, so I just want to give a shout out to that. But I found it interesting that you mentioned that. Tell me, as an FCC commissioner, what is your role in making sure that facial recognition is not used in the discriminatory ways that you talked about?
Yeah. Let me see. Is this thing on? There we go. Or it lit up. It lit up. Yes. So the FCC, I think, is going to be, the FCC does have a role. I think in particular, as we're talking about 5G, and we're talking about a world where there are going to be more and more devices out there, there is going to be increasing connections where this is going to be the connective tissue that is going to identify facial recognition. And I think as you're talking about police cruisers that are out there, that are going to have video cameras connected to them, police cruisers that are identifying people, it's important that we have a communication networks that is helping us think through these issues. I certainly think it probably is something that the FTC needs to certainly be thinking about more. I know that there was legislation proposed by Senators Wyden and Booker in the Senate by House Congresswoman Yvette Clarke over in the House that actually specifically charges the FTC with making sure that they're looking through how algorithmic bias is going to be worked through on the company lane. Great.
So let's talk a little bit about broadband deployment. And I understand that the commissioners have all cast votes on what's called the Broadband Deployment Report, and that's an annual report that the FCC has to submit to show whether or not broadband is being deployed on a reasonable and timely basis to all Americans. And my understanding, it's not an understanding, because Chairman Pai put out a press release saying that indeed, broadband is being deployed on a reasonable and timely basis to all Americans. I mean, do you agree? And whether or not you agree, why does it matter?
Well, I certainly did not agree, which is why I dissented from that item. There were issues of process, and then there were issues of substance. With regard to the process on that 706 report, something that I am thinking through, and something that is becoming increasingly important is data, and getting a better sense of who has broadband in America and who does not. That is at the headline question that the broadband report, the 706 report, is supposed to deal through. We know that the broadband report in its initial draft form had a $62 million connection problem. Basically, there was a company, this is publicly known, called Barrier Free, that stated that it had gone literally over 6 months from 0 connections to over 62 million connections. They had a footprint, allegedly, of over 20% of the United States. Turns out it was dead wrong. And so that's basically the problem that I'm talking about as a matter of process. The fact that the FCC submitted a report to other commissioners where they were not aware of egregiously bad data smacks to me of an agency that does not fully understand who's connected and who isn't. And more pointedly, the fact that a red alarm did not go off, that you had a brand new entrant that became arguably the second largest footprint in America, that there was not an outlier detection button that went off, is concerning to me. With regard to substance, I think it is very clear that we have millions and millions of America, over 24 million Americans who do not have high-speed internet. There was, of course, a Microsoft report that had a number much larger, 163 million that are not, in fact, deploying broadband. The FCC needs to get a better handle on who has broadband, who doesn't. And what really gets me about the report as well is making sure that if you are 10 steps back from your goal, and you move 2 steps forward, you should say we moved 2 steps forward. You shouldn't celebrate it as mission accomplished. I think we are certainly getting broadband out a little bit more each year, but mission has not been accomplished. We're still 8 steps behind in my mind.
So you've put your finger on the biggest problem the FCC has, and that it doesn't know where broadband is. You mentioned that. And that their maps of where broadband is are useless. And part of the problem is that right now, when carriers give information of where they have broadband, number one, it's where they could provide broadband. And number two is if one person in a census block is being served, then everybody is being deemed served. And that's just crazy talk, right? So how would you improve the mapping? Like, what does the FCC need to do? What does Congress need to do? How granular should the measurement be? Just, riff on the mapping problem.
So I could not have said it better myself. The 2 problems with the data that we collect are, first, that we are allowing folks to say where they could serve. And we've seen that in particular with Mobility Fund 2, which is basically a fund where we're trying to, the Universal Service Fund is going to pay to get more wireless connections everywhere. And that had to be suspended because we didn't have a good assessment there, but there were data problems in Mobility Fund 2. But that problem of where could you serve, and then the issue of the census block are the 2 core things that I see from my perspective that have allowed overstatement of where coverage actually is. And that's why we can't figure out what to do with the mapping situation. And so focusing on those 2 core problems, I think there are a lot of good ideas out there. US Telecom has a good idea. A lot of folks have a lot of proposals. There are proposals on the Hill. But 2 things that I'm really going to be looking for are, first of all, I think we have to have providers say, where do you serve right now? Not where could you serve, where are you right now? And then second, it has to be at the address level. I think if we get those 2 kind of core flags planted, then we'll be able to move forward with more confidence.
Great. So Chairman Pai talks a lot about broadband deployment, but I don't think I've ever heard him talk about adoption. Mm-hmm. Right? And there was a recent Pew Research poll showing that 44% of low-income Americans lack home broadband. So what should the federal government be doing to promote broadband adoption?
It is a core point that is something that I'm thinking of. We certainly know that Black and brown folks also have adoption rates at significantly lower levels. We know that there are kind of really 2 categories. There are certainly folks that are elderly, where they almost don't, certainly didn't grow up. They're not digital natives. And I think that they don't have an adoption rate that seems to remain pretty much flat. But we do know that there are a number of other families, Black and brown communities, that know what the internet is, they utilize it, but they're utilizing it. I put my phone away so that it wouldn't go off and disturb us. But I would hold up my phone right now. We know that a lot of Black and brown folks are using their cell phones disproportionately higher. 57% of African American homes, 47% of Latino homes do not have fixed broadband to their homes. And these cell phones do a lot today. They do a lot more than they have ever done. But it's hard to have your kiddo do their homework on them. It's hard to do a job on them. It's hard to formulate a resume on them. And so it is going to be deeply important for me that we continue to have folks be able to get fixed broadband into their home. The other thing that I would highlight, and I think we're nibbling around on it, is that this really is a pocketbook issue for a lot of Americans. We know that it is almost $2,700 that the average American family spends on their phone, on their cable, on their internet. And for a lot of folks, that's just a bridge too far. And so it really is something where we need to focus on getting those rates down so that we know that people can afford it and can adopt the internet that we know people need to better their lives.
So I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have a hard stop at 10, but one of the things obviously that's critical to broadband adoption, as you said, is affordability. And the FCC has the Lifeline program, which is a small, too small in my opinion, subsidy for low-income Americans. And it's got a bunch of other universal service programs, and the chairman, Chairman Pai, has proposed a cap, a hard budget cap on those programs. And I thought maybe you can comment not only on the idea of a hard budget cap, but also, there's been a Lifeline proposal out for 18 months now that would essentially gut the program by saying no non-facilities-based provider can get Lifeline subsidies. So in other words, resellers like TracFone and others would not be able to get it. There was a hue and cry. I haven't seen anybody support it. But wanted to get your take, number one, on the cap idea for across all 4 universal service programs, and also what you think ought to happen with this Lifeline proposal that's been out there for 18 months and frankly freaking out folks like us.
Gigi knows how to pack a punch of a question, don't you? So I'll start with the second first, which is Lifeline is a program that I deeply believe in. It is truly a lifeline for the most vulnerable among us. And so the proposal that I have seen would cut off millions of Americans, 7, 8 million, based upon the reseller, the ban on resellers. There's also a proposal of a lifetime cap on somebody's ability to use Lifeline. All of these, I think, are deeply troubling and would certainly be taking us in the wrong direction. We are talking about folks that need this essential connection to apply for jobs, connect with their loved ones in emergency situations. It is that important, and it's called Lifeline for a reason. The good news, I think there's some hope based upon, not to get too weedy, but the DC Circuit struck down a lot of this with regard to the tribal Lifeline, where the chairman had proposed similar ideas, and so I do think there is some a glimmer of hope that some of that will, I think from a regulatory perspective, if he proposed the same ideas here in this Lifeline, I think it would reach the similar result, which would be struck down. But I think it is taking us in the wrong direction. With regard to an overall cap, I also think not the right direction. I do think it would, there are 4 programs, obviously, for universal service. I think it would pit some of the programs against each other. Back to the point that we've been talking about almost all day, I don't think the FCC, as we sit here right now, has a firm understanding of who has broadband and who doesn't, and so to set an arbitrary cap on who, on what the amount and what the programs would be able to get, I think is not a fruitful discussion for us to have. I think we should really be. Let me throw this line by you. I think we should be working on mapping, not capping.
Love it.
is where I'm at. And then the last thing I would say very quickly is, one of the specific proposals in there is to tether rural health care, which is getting broadband out to rural hospitals, with the E-rate program, which I think is a troubling idea. We do know that historically, the rural health care program has been undersubscribed, but because of changes in the program, it is now blowing through a lot of their numbers and of their caps. And if you tethered the two of those together, I think they would cannibalize each other. Certainly, there would be an issue where if healthcare continues to be oversubscribed, it would eat into E-rate, which I think is deeply troubling. E-rate, of course, provides broadband connections generally for schools. And so I don't think that is a good path for us to think through at the agency.
Well, look, this was a fantastic conversation. If your next 100 days is as much as good as your first 100 days, we have a lot to look forward to. I didn't really get to ask you to tell us more about yourself, and I know you've got to go, but you should learn more about this guy because he is already a force to be reckoned with and will continue to be so, and I believe is going to be a great friend to this community. So thank you very much, Commissioner Starks.
Thank you so much.